And that's, what Dave's underscoring is leaders are learners.
Yeah.
You're voracious learners.
Lifelong.
Lifelong. It doesn't ever stop. You're always looking for somebody that's ahead of you in the curve and say, I need to learn and I've got to go. And let me just tell you, as a church planner, we've sat with a bunch of church planners. And if you go and spend somebody else's time, don't go to tell them everything you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please.
Don't you love that when they do that?
Oh. You sit in this guy's office and you go, let me tell you what we're doing. We're going to do this and we're doing this. And this is what I do. I just let them talk.
Me too.
If you don't ask me a question, we're done in 15, 20 minutes. Man, thanks so much for coming. You go and you with just a list of questions. I remember the first time I went, I was just hitting walls, and I'm thinking, how do I need to do it? I went down to Flamingo Road back in the day when Dan Sutherland was a pastor.
Yeah.
I got in touch, and I said, hey, can I just come ask questions? I'll just take you to lunch. I'll do it. I went down to Fort Lauderdale, and I had this list of questions for Dan. And Dan, I just downloaded question after question. I'm writing the answers, and I'm just writing feverishly. He said, would you like to meet some of our staff? Well, yeah. What a bonus, right? He lined me up with every staff member, and I sat down and asking them questions. Well, that's where I met Hal Mayer. Hal was the executive pastor down there. And I walked out, and and ever since then, I'm just going, okay, who's ahead of me in the curve? I got to find him. I got to ask questions. I need to know. I need to learn.
I don't know if I'd use Hal as an example, but I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
I'm just kidding. One of the things I think that underscores what Ron's talking about is an attitude. It's an attitude of humility. It's an attitude of coachability. And so when we look for church planters, we're looking to see if they're coachable. Mm-hmm. And I would say the guys that applied for the $20,000 scholarship, that was a theme we saw through each one of these guys, was a sense of humility, a wonderful sense of confidence in what God was doing. They're all afraid. They should be. And yet they're going to work through that, but there's a sense of humility, like we know God's in this and but we want to learn all we can. We want to be coachable. And I think with leadership, Ron, leadership is a gift. The Bible says it's a gift in Romans 12. And we're to do it. If you have that gift, you're to lead with all diligence. Right. So you're to put everything you have into that. That's an incredible gift. Not everybody has that. And it's that age-old, are leaders born or are leaders made, Yeah. And they say, well, I've never met one who wasn't born, but they're certainly made as well. And I like to think of it as a muscle that can be developed. And maybe somebody has a greater muscle mass just the way they were born, the way God wired them. But then there's others who come along. A good example would be a Clay Matthews from the Green Bay Packers. Here's a guy who wasn't very big when he graduated high school, went to college, wasn't drafted very high in the pro draft, but last year was the defensive player of the year, and he's a mass. He's incredible, but it came through hard work. It came through weightlifting, being in the gym, doing all the stuff that it takes. So leaders, sometimes guys are natural leaders, but other guys can even surpass them through the working out, through the developing that muscle.
That's good. And here's something we learned years ago. In order for you to grow as a leader, the pastor has to, this isn't in your notes, I think it's off notes, the pastor has to give up the ministry.
Yeah.
And the people have to give up the pastor. This is hard because people don't get it, people don't understand it. But I tell folks at the Springs all the time, this place outgrew me a long time ago. With thousands of people, I'm not going to know each of you personally. And you have to be willing to give up the ministry and turn people loose on ministry, and they have to be willing to give you up. To know, what, I'm not going to have this, we're not going to do lunch and dinner and play golf together. It's just not humanly possible. So,
and there's a point in which that comes, and it's usually through the growth, not necessarily time. So when you plant a church, you're friends with everybody. You know their wives' names, you know their kids' names, you know their dogs' names, you know everything about them, they know everything about you. But as the church grows, you can't do that with everybody. And the new people coming in, you need to get to them. Remember what Larry Osborne told us? He said, you got to fight your way to the fringe. Because your tendency is just you'll hang around people who are comfortable, but you as the lead pastor, you got to be out there on Sunday morning greeting that new person, making them feel welcome along with your greeters, especially in a new church plant. And so, but there comes a time when the church is around 200. And it kind of breaks through that barrier where for the church to continue to grow, you've got to make that change. And you can even talk about it. I think it's good to talk about, because otherwise people are like, what happened? He was with me all the time, now he's hanging out with those guys all the time. And so I think it's good to address it.
Yeah, you've got to, I mean, especially early on, teach some of these principles to the people. You know, I mean, and we do it like through core values around here. Every member's a minister. What's that mean? Well, let me tell you what that means. That means that I don't do hospitals. I mean, there's some things I learned early on. There was a season where I was just wearing myself out, and we went on a staff retreat, and one of our staff members looked at me and said, all right, let's make 2 lists. And the first list is, what is it that you do around here? And we made a list of like 26 things. And he went, okay, great. Now, tore it off, put it on the side. He said, now, let's make another list. What has God called you to do? And it was like a list of 4 things. He said, puts the 2 of them next to each other. This is easy. You're going to stop doing those 22 things. I went, what? I mean, those 22 things, I mean, they're weddings, funerals. I mean, there's good stuff on there. That's what pastors do. And he goes, not you. Not if you're going to live to tell about it. You're going to give that away. And that's the hard thing, to give that stuff away.
And I think, Ron, that a lot of guys, they can't make that jump. And so they become the chaplain of the church, and they do all the weddings and all the funerals because they can't break away from that and see that in order for them to really go to the next level, they must become not the shepherd, but the rancher. Right. And that's a huge, so we say that you can get to 200 or 300 with ministry skills. And when you're talking about you don't do the hospital, you do the hospital in the first couple years when you plant the church, but then you get to a point where you can only grow beyond the 200 barrier with leadership skills. And I even like calling pastors, even the terminology, to call them leaders and address them as leaders versus just pastors. Just to get that in their mindset that, hey, I'm a leader, I'm leading an organization, I'm leading a body of people with other staff, and that's how I see myself. It becomes a new identity.
And it is a new identity.
It's a new identity.
Most guys, I mean, you get into this because you're going, I love people, I'm a pastor. And you know what if you're not willing to change some of those skill sets, you say think differently, you're going to become the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And that's why the average church in America is under 100 people, because that's all you can control. And you know, it's a matter of giving it up, and that's mobilize your people. Number 3, for ministry, turn people loose to do the ministry. I've got all kinds of thoughts and people that just serve, but that's just something that you've got to be willing to just say, you know what, it's not about me. And let me just write this down. Remember years ago, hearing Rick Warren say, it's called the "You're It" principle. The "You're It" principle. This is the way it looks. Someone comes up to you, because people always do, especially in new churches, and say, we need to have a ministry too. Pastor, I think we need to start a prayer ministry. I need to think we need to start a ministry to the homeless. Or what if we did a ministry to... And every time someone comes up to me at the Springs and says that, I go, "You're it." And they go, "What?" And I go, "You're it." And I said, no, they go, "No, I don't know how to do that." I said, "Me either. But God put it on your heart, not mine, so you're it. Go. I mean, I'll help you, resource you, tell you, go. But you're it." And when you turn people loose like that, they just kind of go, "Okay," and they take off. And you've just got to be willing to release the ministry to people. Hospital ministry, I don't go to the hospital. I tell our people, listen, if you see me in the hospital, you're sicker than they're telling you. I mean, it's just, I just don't go. Yeah, it's just
so-
kind of getting in there, isn't it? I know it's late, but it's just, you got to release it to other people. Because when you do ministry, you're robbing somebody else
That's right.
of being used by God.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that and check your ego at the door, Pastor. That's the growth.
Yeah, and I think Jim and Jennifer even added a new twist to that. They do a tag you're it.
Oh, that's
So
good.
they
That's good.
involve the touch part of it, and you're it. The thing I found about that works and it's very healthy, but sometimes that person isn't capable of leading a ministry, but there's other people who have that same passion for that ministry. So if you can get those people together, and so maybe that person says, and other staff or ministry leaders say, we're going to have a meeting for all those who would like to be in a care ministry, and now you get 10 or 12 people in the room, chances are there's a leader out of that, and you can run with that. So it's a great principle there.
Let me give you one that's off notes. I drew these arrows up here because, just saying this is the visionary leader, and you're going in this direction, and you're running, and you've got all these people following, and let this kind of represent a congregation or people that are in your church, and when you look at all those arrows, and this is you following this way, and you're saying, and this is where we're going, let's go, and you got people following you. Of all these arrows, which one of these guys, if these each represent an individual, which one of these guys do you think is the most dangerous? It's not.
Which one?
This guy or this guy. You go, they're way off, man. They're going. No.
You know, don't you?
Yeah, everybody knows they're off.
She knows.
Yeah.
She knows which one it is.
It's this guy who is just a little off, but he looks like he's with the group. But he's just a little off. And because he looks like he's with the group, he could sway other people. But if you're going this way, run this thing out, a few months, you're here, but he's led a group of people way off course. These people, everybody knows they're nuts. That's Cousin Eddie.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
He's off, man. But this guy looks like he's with us, but he's not. So in leadership, always look for this guy and make sure that you identify who the people are that'll take your course as influencers off course.
You know what I found, Ron? That guy, he's usually passive aggressive.
Yes.
And you got to watch out for those passive aggressive types. They'll smile at you and they'll stab you in the back. And you think they're with you, but when that plays itself out, there's a huge gap. So identify that, and then it comes back to part of the leadership role is don't let anybody hijack your vision.
Right.
If you think of it as a plane, you're going somewhere,
Right.
that type of person can hijack the vision of the church, and they can do it in a very subtle way sometimes. So you just got to watch for that. That's part of your job as a leader.
It's a great word, because when you're starting a church, you're going to have a lot of these guys that are going to come because going, new church, I can have influence.
That's right. That's right.
But they've got their own picture. And you need to be careful. You need to be the vision protector of the church.